Serafina's tiny gasp was drowned out by the clatter of dishes. Lily. My 2-year-old daughter hit the hardwood floor with a sharp thud, her little paper turkey crushed beneath her. For a heartbeat, the dining room went completely silent except for her frightened cry. I dropped my fork and rushed toward her. Before I could even reach her, my older brother Derek leaned back in his chair with an irritated sigh. "Oh, come on," he muttered. "She barely fell." I scooped Lily into my arms, my hands shaking as I checked the back of her head. "Derek, you shoved her." He shrugged without even looking at my daughter. "You're being dramatic." I looked around the Thanksgiving table, expecting someone, anyone, to say he was wrong. My father lowered his eyes to his plate. My mother reached for the gravy boat as if nothing had happened. An aunt forced an uncomfortable smile. Someone quietly asked, "Should we just keep eating before everything gets cold?" That was the moment I realized the only person crying in the room was my toddler. Then my husband slowly pushed his chair back. Nathan didn't raise his voice. He didn't point. He didn't even look at Derek first. Instead, he looked at every single person sitting around that table. And when he finally spoke, the room seemed to stop breathing. Nobody leaves this table yet. Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house had always followed the same script. My mother spent days preparing enough food for 20 people, even though only 12 of us ever came. My father insisted everyone sit in the same seats every year. Derek always occupied the chair at the head of the table, as though he were the guest of honor instead of their 31-year-old son, who still expected everyone else to adjust to his moods. I had spent years convincing myself that family traditions mattered more than old resentments. Nathan had never believed that. He'd only attended 3 Thanksgiving dinners with my family since we married, and every year on the drive home, he'd ask the same question. "Does Derek always talk to you like that?" Every year I answered the same way. "He's just difficult." Nathan never argued. He simply nodded and let the conversation end. I told myself that was enough. I believed keeping peace was the mature thing to do. Now I stood in my parents' dining room holding my sobbing little girl, while the peace I'd spent 25 years protecting rested on everyone's willingness to pretend they hadn't seen what happened. My mother finally looked up. "Serafina," she said softly, almost pleading, "please don't ruin Thanksgiving over an accident." "An accident?" I stared at her in disbelief. "Mom, he shoved your granddaughter." Derek laughed under his breath. "She ran into me." "No," I shot back. "She brushed your chair." He rolled his eyes. "Same difference." Lily buried her face against my shoulder, still trembling. Nathan walked over without saying a word. He gently touched Lily's arm. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "can Daddy see where you got hurt?" She nodded through her tears. His expression stayed calm as he carefully checked her forehead and hands. There was no shouting, no threats, no anger visible on his face. That frightened me more than if he'd exploded. Because I knew Nathan. He was a Navy officer who had spent years making difficult decisions under pressure. When he became this quiet, it meant he had already decided exactly what came next. He straightened, looked once more around the table, meeting each pair of eyes that had refused to defend a frightened 2-year-old. Then his gaze settled on Derek. "I asked everyone to stay," Nathan said evenly. His hand slipped into his pocket. "And there's a reason for that." Nathan knelt beside Lily again, lowering himself until he was at eye level with her. "Can you show Daddy where it hurts?" She sniffled and pointed to her elbow first, then rubbed the back of her head. "I know," he said gently. "You're very brave." I held her close while he carefully examined her arms and legs, making sure she could move everything without pain. His hands were steady, the same steady hands that had calmed frightened sailors during emergencies, now comforting a terrified little girl. "She seems okay," he told me quietly, "but we'll keep an eye on her." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Across the table, Derek let out an exaggerated sigh. Are we done with the performance? Nathan didn't answer him. Instead, he handed Lily her crumpled paper turkey. You worked hard on this, didn't you? She gave a tiny nod. We'll fix it later. Those simple words nearly broke me. Because in that moment, Nathan was doing what no one else in my family seemed interested in doing, making our daughter feel safe. Derek reached for another dinner roll, as though nothing unusual had happened. I'm starving, he muttered. Can we eat now? My father cleared his throat. I think everyone's emotions are just running high. I stared at him. Dad, she was shoved. It happened fast, he replied carefully. I'm sure Derek didn't mean. I didn't do anything, Derek interrupted. She walked into me. No, I said firmly. You pushed her. He smirked. You always have to make everything about yourself. The words landed harder than they should have. Because they weren't new. They were almost identical to what I'd heard my entire life. Whenever Derek broke my toys as kids. Stop being so sensitive. Whenever he embarrassed me in front of friends. That's just how brothers are. Whenever he screamed at me. You know how to push his buttons. No matter what happened, somehow I always became the problem. Nathan looked from Derek to my parents. His voice remained calm. Has anyone here asked Lily if she's okay? Silence. Not one person answered. Not even my mother. She folded her napkin instead. I think everyone just wants to move past this, she whispered. Move past it, I asked. Families have disagreements. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A disagreement, I repeated. Mom, she's two. My mother's eyes filled with frustration. And she's fine. That's not the point. No, she replied. The point is that Thanksgiving only comes once a year. I stared at her. So does my daughter's childhood. The room fell quiet again. Even Derek stopped chewing. Nathan stood beside me without speaking. His presence alone made me feel less alone than I ever had inside this house. He leaned toward me so only I could hear. Serafina. I turned. His voice was almost a whisper. Are you done protecting people who have never protected you? The question hit somewhere deep inside me. For years, I'd convinced myself that if I stayed patient, if I stayed respectful, if I avoided confrontation, eventually, my parents would see me. Eventually, they'd choose fairness. Instead, they just watched their granddaughter cry while asking me not to make a scene. I looked at Lily resting against my shoulder. Then I looked at my parents. Finally, I looked at Derek. For the first time in my life, I didn't care whether they thought I was overreacting. I cared whether my daughter would grow up believing this kind of behavior was normal. I took a slow breath. Then I met Nathan's eyes. Yes. Just one word. But it felt like closing the door on 20 years of silence. Nathan gave the smallest nod. He squeezed my hand once before turning toward the table. His eyes settled on every member of my family. Then, in the same calm voice that had never risen above conversation level, he said, Then let me finish what you've all avoided for 20 years. Nathan didn't raise his voice. He didn't point a finger at Derek. Instead, he reached into his pocket, unlocked his phone, and laid it face up in the center of the dining table. The quiet clink against the wood seemed louder than Lily's cries had been. Every conversation stopped. Derek folded his arms. What are you doing? Nathan looked at him evenly. I'm making sure no one has to rely on memory. He tapped the screen. A video began to play. The recording showed Lily proudly walking through the dining room, holding her little paper turkey with both hands. Her tiny voice giggled as she showed it to different relatives. My mother smiled in the video. My father laughed. Everything looked warm and ordinary. Then Lily wandered toward Derek's chair. She barely brushed the back of it. The recording clearly showed Derek looking down, his expression hardening. His lips moved. Move. Then his arm extended. Not a reflex. Not an accident. A deliberate shove. Lily stumbled backward and hit the floor. Her cry echoed through the speakers. No one at the table said a word. The video continued long enough to capture something even more painful. No one rushed to her except me. Nathan paused the recording. Silence settled over the room. Derek was the first to speak. That's not what happened. Nathan looked at him. We just watched what happened. You only filmed one angle. There was only one angle because there was only one event. Derek scoffed. You're twisting it. Before Nathan could respond, my mother leaned across the table. Please turn that off. Nathan gently slid the phone out of her reach. No. Nathan, she said, her voice trembling, this isn't helping. He met her eyes. No, Margaret, pretending it didn't happen wasn't helping. My father shifted uncomfortably. Everyone's upset. Maybe we should discuss this privately. Nathan shook his head. It happened publicly. So it stays public. No one argued with him. Not because he sounded intimidating. Because he sounded reasonable. And that made it impossible to dismiss him. An aunt who had been sitting near the end of the table quietly wiped at her eyes. I didn't realize he pushed her. You were talking to Uncle Steve, another cousin admitted. I only heard her crying. Nathan nodded. That's why I played the recording. He picked up the phone but didn't lock it. I wasn't filming Derek. He looked at Lily, who had finally stopped crying and was resting against my shoulder. I was recording my daughter's first Thanksgiving. His voice softened for the first time. I wanted to remember her showing everyone the turkey she made. He looked back at the table. Instead, I recorded something none of us should ever forget. The weight of those words settled over every chair. For the first time all afternoon, relatives weren't looking at me. They were looking at Derek. Really looking at him. He noticed it immediately. This is ridiculous, he snapped. Everybody's acting like I attacked her. You shoved a toddler, my cousin Rachel said quietly. It wasn't that hard. My uncle frowned. It doesn't have to be hard. Derek looked toward our parents, expecting them to rescue him as they always had. My father opened his mouth. Closed it. My mother tried again. Derek has always been impulsive. Nathan turned toward her. Impulsive doesn't explain why no one told him to apologize. She had no answer. The balance in the room shifted. For the first time in years, Derek wasn't surrounded by agreement. He was surrounded by doubt. His confidence began to crack. He forced a laugh. So what? You embarrassed everyone over one video. Nathan's expression never changed. He slowly unlocked another folder on his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then he looked directly at Derek. You're right. He glanced around the table. The video isn't why I stood up. Nathan's thumb moved across the screen. The family leaned forward without realizing it. I've been married to Serafina for 4 years, he said calmly, long enough to notice that today wasn't the beginning of this story. He opened a folder labeled Messages Asterisk. Dozens of screenshots appeared. Not one had been edited or highlighted. They were simple text conversations saved over the years. Nathan turned the phone so everyone at the table could read. The first screenshot was from 3 years earlier. Serafina, asterisk Derek screamed at me in front of everyone today. Mom, asterisk that's just Derek, don't take it personally. Nathan swiped to the next one. Serafina, asterisk he grabbed my arm so hard it bruised. Dad, asterisk you know how he gets when he's angry, just give him space. Another swipe. Serafina, asterisk I'm thinking about skipping Christmas. Mom, Asterisk, please don't tell anyone what happened. It'll only create more drama. The room grew painfully quiet. No one reached for their food anymore. No one even looked at Derek. Nathan continued. I didn't collect these because I wanted revenge. He looked at my parents. I saved them because I kept seeing the same pattern. He pointed to the screen. Every single time Derek crossed a line, his finger moved to another message. Someone explained it. Another swipe. Someone minimized it. Another. And someone expected Serafina to be the one who kept the peace. My mother covered her mouth. My father stared at the tabletop. For years, I had wondered if I was imagining it. Seeing those conversations laid out in order made something inside me finally settle. I hadn't imagined any of it. Nathan wasn't exposing a single bad Thanksgiving. He was exposing a lifetime. Derek pushed back his chair. This is pathetic. He tried to laugh. You've been spying on the family. Nathan shook his head. No. He looked directly at him. Your family documented this themselves. He tapped the screen again. I simply refused to delete it. Derek stood. So what? Everyone gets angry. No, Nathan replied evenly. Everyone gets angry. Not everyone gets protected from the consequences. That sentence landed harder than any raised voice could have. An uncomfortable silence settled over the dining room. Then my Uncle Frank cleared his throat. I've got something to say. Every head turned toward him. He looked at Derek first, then at my parents. I remember when Derek shoved one of his teammates in high school. Nobody interrupted him. The coach suspended him. Frank sighed. Your father marched into that school, demanding they reverse it. Dad slowly closed his eyes. Frank continued. Then there was the barbecue 5 years ago. He looked at me. You left early crying. I nodded. I remember wondering why. He turned back toward my parents. Now I know. My cousin Rachel spoke next. I always thought Serafina seemed nervous around Derek. Another relative nodded. I did too. One by one, memories surfaced. Not rumors. Not accusations. Things people had seen, but never questioned, because my parents always explained them away. The story my family had told for years was beginning to collapse under its own weight. Nathan looked around the room. His voice remained controlled. Today changed everything. He rested one hand gently on Lily's back. When an adult chooses to hurt another adult, that's serious. He paused. But today, he looked directly at Derek. You made it a child's problem. No one defended Derek. Not even my mother. Nathan continued. I won't allow my daughter to grow up believing that people who hurt her deserve protection, while she is expected to stay quiet. He turned to me. From today forward, Lily will never be left alone with anyone who excuses violence. I squeezed his hand. I agree. Saying those words out loud felt different than thinking them. Permanent. Real. Derek looked around the table, searching for someone, anyone to back him up. Instead, he found lowered eyes. Folded arms. Disappointed faces. For the first time in his life, silence wasn't protecting him. It was judging him. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Then, before anyone else could speak, my father slowly lifted his head. His voice was barely above a whisper. We should have stopped this years ago. No one answered my father immediately. His words hung over the dining room like a confession that had arrived years too late. For as long as I could remember, my father had always found a way to explain Derek's behavior. He didn't mean it. He's under a lot of stress. Let's not make this bigger than it is. This time, there was no explanation. Only regret. My mother slowly lowered her head into her hands. Tears slipped through her fingers. "I thought," she whispered, "I thought if we kept smoothing things over, eventually he'd grow out of it." Nathan answered before anyone else could. "You didn't smooth it over." His tone wasn't cruel. It was factual. "You taught him there would always be someone standing between him and the consequences." No one argued, because everyone knew he was right. Derek finally pushed himself away from the table. "This is unbelievable." His voice had lost its confidence. "You've all decided I'm some kind of monster over one stupid mistake." I looked directly at him. "No." He frowned. "This isn't about one mistake." I took a slow breath. "This is about every time you hurt someone and expected the rest of us to pretend it never happened." He looked away. "You shoved my daughter." My voice stayed calm. "Then you watched her cry." His shoulders stiffened. "And instead of apologizing, you called me dramatic." The room was silent. "You didn't just shove my daughter," I continued. "You expected everyone else to help you erase it." For the first time in my life, Derek had nothing to say. He looked toward our parents one last time. Neither of them came to his rescue. My father stood. "Derek." My brother looked at him hopefully. Dad shook his head. "You need to leave." Derek blinked. "What?" "You heard me." "Dad." "No." My father's voice was firm for the first time that afternoon. "You crossed a line." He glanced toward Lily, who had fallen asleep against Nathan's shoulder. "And we crossed 1 year ago by refusing to make you face your own actions." Derek looked around the room. No one moved. No one defended him. Not one relative told us we were overreacting. Not one person asked us to let it go. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. As he reached the front door, he stopped without turning around. "I guess I know where I stand now." Nathan answered quietly. "No." Derek paused. "Now you know where the boundaries are." The front door closed behind him. The sound echoed through the house. For the first time all day, the tension began to lift. My mother quietly walked over to me. She looked at Lily before meeting my eyes. "I'm so sorry." There had been a time when hearing those words would have erased everything. "Not anymore." "I believe you're sorry," I said honestly. "But trust isn't rebuilt with one sentence." She nodded, crying openly now. "I know." My father stepped beside her. "We failed you." I didn't interrupt. "We kept asking you to be the bigger person because it was easier than asking Derek to change." He looked ashamed. And that wasn't love. It was the first time either of my parents had admitted what had happened instead of explaining it away. I appreciated the honesty. But honesty wasn't the same as repair. Nathan gently squeezed my shoulder. "We're leaving." No one tried to stop us. As we gathered Lily's little coat and her paper turkey, my aunt quietly asked if she could help flatten the crumpled craft. Nathan smiled. "I think Lily and I will fix it together." It was a small thing, but it reminded me that broken things don't always have to be thrown away. Sometimes they just need to be handled by people who actually care. The weeks that followed were difficult. Derek sent several messages, insisting everyone had exaggerated what happened. Neither Nathan nor I replied. Instead, we made our boundaries clear through our actions. There would be no visits with Lily. No birthdays together. No holidays together. Not until genuine accountability came before excuses. Several relatives reached out individually. They apologized for staying silent. One admitted she had frozen because she didn't know what to do. Another confessed she had spent years avoiding conflict with Derek because it seemed easier. This time, easier had finally become impossible. My parents started attending family counseling. Not because we demanded it. Because they realized they had spent decades protecting one child while slowly losing the other. Our relationship didn't magically heal. It became honest. That was enough for a beginning. A year later, Thanksgiving looked completely different. Nathan and I hosted dinner in our own home. The guest list was smaller. Every person there respected one simple rule. Children came before anyone's pride. Lily, now 3 years old, ran through the living room wearing a paper turkey crown she had made in preschool. She laughed as Nathan chased her around the dining table. When she tripped over her own tiny feet, 3 adults rushed to help her before she even had time to cry. No one sighed. No one blamed her. No one told anyone they were being dramatic. They simply picked her up, brushed off her knees, and made sure she was okay. I watched from the kitchen doorway, realizing how different love looked when it wasn't competing with denial. Nathan walked over and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "Better Thanksgiving?" he asked. I smiled. "The best one I've ever had." Across the room, Lily proudly held up another paper turkey. This one wasn't wrinkled. It wasn't torn. And neither was the peace inside our home. That Thanksgiving taught me something I wish I'd learned years earlier. The strongest family isn't the one that protects the loudest person in the room. It's the one that refuses to stay silent when the smallest person needs protection.